All right, everybody, we're back for part 2 of our interview. This is Dale with Stumbling Greenward, and now we've got Susan Bernhardt on the line. Susan has moved into her passive house 2 years ago, and as that she's retired, she's in the house a lot more than if she was working 9 to 5. So she's a lot of fun, and she's got some great stories about living in passive houses, and so that's why I wanted to share today. Susan, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Hi, Dale.
Fantastic. I know it's very distinct to me. I think it was 2013. I met you at the Canfi show, and I went to talk to Mark, and he had a lineup of fellow passive house, I don't know, nerds, geeks. I'm not sure what we are, but they were all talking science, and I had happened to talk to you, and I'm so grateful because you just tell it like it is, and you were sharing your experiences of living in the house, and that's why I wanted to have you on. So I guess when your family proposed moving into a passive house, what were your first thoughts?
Well, I was very confused that I might end up living in a house with no furnace, and that did worry me a lot. But as I listened to Mark and Rob, discuss it more and more, and knitted through all these conversations, then in the end, after much discussion, I decided that really it didn't matter if I lived in a house with no furnace, and because I know where I can buy a heater at Home Depot, and if the house doesn't work as they say it will, I'll be okay. I'll have a very nice modern house with lots of plug-ins and lights and big, rooms I want and the kitchen I want. And I know where I can get a heater. So that was my sort of, thoughts. And then we moved into the house, and, we moved in June. And so, you sort of get used to living in a new house. And after a while, you realize that this house is all the same temperature all the time. It's 20 degrees. And then a year goes by and it's still 20 degrees. And then you realize how this has changed your life, living in a house that's the same temperature all the time, because I'd never lived in a house where that's the same temperature in the morning and at night. You live in a house where during the day it can be comfortable, whatever, 20, 25 or whatever, 22. And then at night, you'll turn down the heater and it'll go down to, whatever, 18 or 16. And then in the morning, the furnace comes on and the air blows around, and, and then you're too hot. And then by noon, you're putting on the sweater. And by evening, well, my feet were always cold. and so we had a hot tub. We had a hot tub for, 20 years. We had a hot tub. And every night I'd crawl into that hot tub and warm up and crawl into my bed. And so, that was the first big thing we noticed, that when we moved here, by the time everything got, moved and everything, it was August before we set up the hot tub, and we set it up. And then after Mark got over the shock of how much electricity that used, because he had a monitor on his phone, and as soon as we plugged it in, the monitor went bing. And then, there it was, because after all, we'd had one for so many years, we couldn't imagine living without one. And, the first couple of weeks, then, well, do you want a hot tub tonight? Well, my feet aren't cold, so maybe not tonight. And then, a few weeks, a few days later, well, what about tonight? We really should use it. Well, I don't feel like it. And then this sort of went on for, 3 or 4 weeks, and we looked at each other and thought, we don't need that hot tub anymore because we're not uncomfortable. And then, we thought, okay, maybe later in the winter when it's really cold, like in October. I mean, I know Victoria doesn't get really cold, but,
Yeah.
And then, in October, it was exactly the same story. And we sold our hot tub because I don't need it. We don't need it. And Mark's happy because the power usage went down. But, it's the oddest thing. and to be in an environment that is the same temperature all the time. And it's just beyond people's experience, when I try to explain what it's like. And because you still think of a house where you turn the thermometer on and then the furnace comes on and it blows the air all around. And then, it goes up a few degrees and then it goes down a few degrees and it comes on again. And it's just so different having an environment where the temperature is exactly the same all the time. And you're not cold, you're not hot. It's just the same. And at night and during the day and during the it's very odd. Very different. Very different. And it's hard to explain. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'd agree. Being in a few weeks now, it's that's why I joke that it's boring, because it's
it's hard to explain to people that we use the same blanket summer and winter. I don't have slippers anymore and my feet aren't cold. I have a whole drawer of sweaters in my closet that I don't use because the temperature is the same. And the only time I use them is when I go visit my sister-in-law.
We still love you, though. We still love you.
Well, I get to show them off.
So when you moved into the passive house, did you get a rule book? Was there things you could or couldn't do? Partly, I'm asking. I do know the answer, I guess, but I'm partly asking to just help the viewer get the contrast, like.
One of the things that I asked was, well, can I open the windows? And what about in the summer? Can I open the windows then? And of course you can. And then, Rob even thought, well, maybe we should turn the HRV off. And but then they did the math, and apparently it's only a few cents, and I've forgotten if it's, less than 25 cents or 15 cents a day to run the HRV. And so there's no reason to turn it off. And it does still do the air exchange then, the fresh air still comes around the house. And but you can open the windows anytime you want, even in the winter if you really want to, because the heat loss is small. And so if I'm frying up onions and it's particularly annoying, I might open the window for 5 or 10 minutes. and but there is, in the summertime, at first it took us maybe the first day that the temperature went up to, inside, maybe up to 23. Oh, that's the other thing, that your tolerances of temperature change become very narrow. When it goes down to 19, it's freezing cold. And when it goes up to 22, it's boiling hot. And we argue about how hot it really is. I mean, it's embarrassing to talk about.
Because I think with a furnace, with a thermostat, I think it's like 5 or 7 degrees differential, right? And it's
we had a very efficient furnace at our previous house, and it always went up 2 degrees when you turned it on, and then, before it lowered to the temperature where you set it at. And now, in the summer, it might have gotten up to 23 or something, and we had boiling hot. and it just reminded us that oh, well, in the morning we should maybe close the windows and, and then keep the cold air in. In the evening when it gets cooler, we could open them again. But, that's just normal. I consider that normal. Homeowners.
So I do know one of the things about passive house is the dryer.
Yes.
Because of makeup air and stuff, a conventional ventilated dryer is sort of poo-pooed, I guess. So how did you guys deal with that, and how's that working for you?
Well, actually, I don't have to deal with that because my husband promised me that I wouldn't need a dryer. And because, of course, I didn't believe him, but and Mark and Julie actually didn't believe him and did buy, and so they bought a condensing dryer, which doesn't need an outside vent. And but I didn't buy a dryer, and because we moved it in June, then I told my husband that I want a plug for a dryer, but I won't buy a dryer if everything dries overnight, and that includes jeans. And my rule was overnight drying, and if it dried overnight, I wouldn't buy a dryer. And so I thought, I'll just make sure I can get one by October, November for sure. I'd have one. And I've lived here 2 years. I still don't have a dryer. And Mark and Julie hardly use theirs. And I got a very fancy rolling dryer rack that I can put 2 loads on.
Yeah.
And everything dries overnight, even faster than that, really, mostly. And it's just amazing because there are lots of houses in Victoria that don't have the airflow, and it's all because of the airflow and the air exchange, which, that's sciencey. But there's lots of houses in Victoria where things don't dry. The towels in the bathroom don't dry, and they don't even think of drying their clothes on a rack in the house because there's just too much moisture and no airflow. And so really what it does in my house is that it takes a bit of planning because you can't have things in 2 hours if you wash and dry them. You got to plan overnight at my house. And but like that, it's amazing. We do not have a dryer in Victoria, and that's quite something to do that. Yeah.
So. Yeah, and I think it's important to note for people who maybe don't live on the west coast here in Canada or the northern U.S., but I know when I look at the Outdoor Weather Center, if it's not raining, it often shows that it's 95 to 98% humidity. And that does, our previous house was quite small and very old and conventional, and it got in your house. Like, it maybe wasn't 98% in our house, but absolutely you knew that things were kind of moist. So absolutely with it seems like this last 3 weeks, it's done nothing but rain. I don't know about in Victoria.
But we live in the bubble. It hardly rains here.
Oh, nice. Rub it in. But
well, it did rain last night. A little bit.
But I do know that it's really hammered us here with rain, and but inside, yeah, I notice
the towels,
shirts and stuff, and
the towels dry, and they don't never get mildewy, and that's amazing. Yeah. So and that really is quite unique, I think, for in houses. The other thing I wanted to mention was how quiet this house is. And that's not something that we ever talked about before we moved in. That because of the thick walls and the windows and everything, when you have everything closed, it's super quiet in here. And that you don't really notice it in the summer because you open the windows and, this and that. And the birds wake you up in the morning and all that's good. But then, by the time September comes around and the windows aren't open anymore, then I notice that I can't hear those birds in the morning anymore. In fact, we don't hear anything from the outside. And the grandchildren were super annoyed a few weeks ago when the ice cream truck went by on the street. And they didn't even find out until the next day when the kids were talking about it at school, the neighbor kids. And apparently it went by twice and they never heard it. Now that is something. And it's so quiet inside that when there's no, the grandchildren aren't jumping around. But let's suppose it's evening and everything is quiet. And, when we first moved in, we didn't use the lights very much because we have big windows and so on. And so it wasn't really until September, when it started getting dark, that we noticed that our LED lights buzzed. And and then, it took us a while to even figure out it was the lights that were making this hum. And then, the electrician came, oh, no, everything's working. And then, we said again, and the electrician phoned the supply, whoever it was. And no, that's they're fine and stuff. And then it turns out that the LED lights had a little fan on them, a cooling fan, and that made the little hum.
But because there's no
other noise, we heard that. And so the company replaced all the lights with some other kind that have cooling fins, but not a fan. And so it's fine. And, they said, well, nobody's ever mentioned that this fan is noisy. And it's things like that you notice then, which you wouldn't in another, and so on the appliances too, like the fridge, like you hear it when it turns on and turns off. And I'm just grateful we have a newer fridge that is quiet, because that would get annoying too, right? And so it's very interesting how quiet it is in this house, and yeah, you get used to that.
Yeah, I think I'm finding it certainly does spoil me for other places. At my work, I've got some glass behind me, a wall of glass. So in the summer, my office is like a furnace, and in the winter it's really chilly. And because I lived in an inefficient home before, I wouldn't say I noticed it as much. But now when I'm home, it's like you said, it's always the same. So I go to work, it's like my office is like a torture chamber. You never know what you're going to get.
Yeah. You're going to have to leave a wardrobe there to change into.
my big sweater.
I know.
Maybe you could send me some sweaters I could take to work.
No, I need them when I go visit other people.
All right.
It's very difficult to bite your tongue when you go visit other houses. And the minute you step inside, you realize that, But that was interesting too, I haven't been on many house tours, but we were in Seattle, and there was a tour of homes there. And, the minute we stepped inside a certified passive house, you could feel it, you could smell it, it's that fresh air and the atmosphere. Yeah, it's different. Yeah.
So are there, I know we've talked about a few of them. Is there anything else that you noticed that once you moved into the passive house that you wouldn't have necessarily known living in a regular house? Like I know we talked about the noise and the comfort. Is there anything else?
Well, it works.
Still no furnace? I remember when after you and I had spoke that time at the show, and I had asked Mark, because I was learning, and then I said to Mark, I said, well, what are you using to heat that house?
Yeah.
And he looks at me and he goes, the sun. And I was like, yeah, that'll never work. Are you crazy? And then he said, well, we just, if it gets a little chilly, we bake a batch of cookies and it tops it right up. But
well, when you have to think about it a little differently, because the temperature varies so little. You lose so little heat because it's, this envelope, about that. This insulated envelope. And so because you lose so little heat, it only takes a tiny bit of heat to top it up, that quarter degree that you maybe lost.
Yeah.
And so you don't need a big source of heat. And yes, the sun does warm it, and except for these few months now. And then, it's all physics angled to the sun and all that. And then, so there's the solar gain, and then there's the internal heat gain, which I didn't realize was that significant, that the fridge and the stove and the people and, the hot water and so on. Like, I didn't realize that could heat a house, quite a bit. And, whoever thought of a fridge being warm? And
Well, I know my wife's been out of town for a few days, and I hope she doesn't listen. But I'm missing the 100 watts an hour that she puts out to try and help keep the house at 20 degrees. It's
I know, and
not the same without her.
Yeah, she's very important. And so you realize that, and then there is in our house they chose a small radiator in the HRV. Whatever, hydronic coil, that's what it's called.
Nice.
I love it. And the HRV, so like now, it's on now during this time when there isn't enough sun, heat from the sun, and you need a little bit more to just top it up. But it's not very much, and that's really where you have to sort of think about it, that it's not a lot of heat is needed because you don't lose very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's back to it's 20 degrees all the time.
So if somebody came up to you on the street after they recognized you from the fame and notoriety you'll get from this interview, and they walk up to you and they go, Susan, what is a passive house? How do you describe it?
Well, it's just a wonderful place to live. If you want to know more about it, the science behind it, you have to talk to Mark and Rob. But I can tell you.
Perfect. That's a beautiful answer.
I have a wonderful house to live in. Yeah. And, it'd be, before all these things, like I kept thinking that I'm going to have a house that's new, that has enough plugs, that I can plug the kettle and plug the kettle in and have the microwave running at the same time.
That's all you wanted. That's all you wanted.
and no fuses blow. And when I tell that to people, the people just roll their eyes because they've never lived in a house where they could do that. Somebody even told me they couldn't dry their hair at the same time as they were making coffee, and I thought that was sad.
Yeah, no, I grew up in one of those houses, and you had to be pretty strategic about, I know there was no way you could weld and Mom could make supper at the same time. That was a game changer.
I know. So, no, it's just beyond imagining how comfortable it is, and that's really beyond experience, and so and yet when you look at the house, it just looks normal, right? You have to sort of look closely to see that it is any different, which when you start talking to people, they think, oh wow, you must live in a really weird house, and that's, it just looks normal. It looks like a normal house. It's not made out of straw. It's not made out of rubber tires or glass or other strange things. It's made out of normal materials, just used in a different way.
Yeah. No, and I think you absolutely nailed it. When I was talking to Rob a little bit earlier, that's what I said was part of my motivation for trying to do something for Passive House Day other than just have people come through the house, was just because I could probably put an International Passive House sign at any other house, and people off the street who were going to spend 2 minutes on the walkthrough wouldn't necessarily know any different if they didn't know what a passive house was.
Yeah, if you don't look closely, you would never notice that the walls are a tiny bit thicker and that the windows are, I've seen those windows before.
Yeah, or that it's super quiet, or that it's 20 degrees.
No.
And
yeah, you have to spend time here to know that. So, yeah.
Perfect. Well, is there anything else on your notes that I didn't cover?
No, that's what I had down. And
Awesome.
I'm looking forward to staying overnight in a passive hotel in Europe someday. That's on my list.
You got an in with some developer and a builder there. Maybe you just
Maybe he'll take me.
Well, no, I was thinking maybe you just build one there. You got all the.
No, I want to go to Europe.
Oh, okay. I got it. Yes, Europe.
Got that?
A little slow on the change, but I'm picking up what you're laying down. I heard really great things about that hotel. I talked to some guys who went, and it was this guy's passion to build it, and he's very hands-on. Like, not only was it comfortable to stay in, but it was also a super customer experience because he's so passionate about everything. So yeah, I look forward to it.
Well, no. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, good to talk to you.
Is there, if anybody had any other questions, should they funnel them through Rob then? Is that easiest way to get a hold of you?
That would be best, yeah.
Perfect. All right, take care, Susan. Thanks a lot for your time.
Okay,
bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Stumbling Greenward podcast. You can access links to all the resources that were mentioned in this podcast at stumblinggreenward.com/podcast and clicking on this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, I recommend you check out some of the other podcasts, including jargon-free interviews on Windows, multi-unit construction, passive house development, and much more. Before you go, I'd be eternally grateful if you were to share this interview with others, and be sure to click subscribe on iTunes. Thanks, and have a great day.